Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the UK launch of Winter Counts by David, Heska, Wanbli, Weiden. I'm Vic Watson, one half of Bay Tales. The better half, Simon Buick, is behind the scenes tonight, keeping all of those digital plates spinning. We are so delighted to have so many familiar and new viewers tonight to celebrate this fantastic book. Just a couple of reminders before we get going. Along the bottom of your bar somewhere, or maybe in the top corner, who knows, there should be a chat facility. Please do feel free to use that. If you want to chat to everybody, please select everybody from the drop-down box. There's also a Q&A button, so if you have any questions for David or any of our other panelists tonight, please do drop them in there and I will endeavour to ask them. So I would like you to be introduced to David Heska Wanbli Weiden. He's an enrolled citizen of the Sichongu Lakota Nation and is the author of the novel Winter Counts, which was nominated for, deep breath, the 2021 Edgar Award for Best First Novel by the Mystery Writers of America. Winter Counts also won the 2021 Spur Award for Best Contemporary Novel by the Western Writers of America. The novel was a New York Times Editor's Choice, main selection of the Book of the Month Club, and named a Best Book of 2020 by NPR, Publishers Weekly, Literary Journal, and other magazines. Fantastic, and rightly so. David lives in Denver, Colorado with his family. Welcome, David. I know it's not actually evening where you are, so good afternoon.
Well, thank you all. It is really my pleasure to be here. And I just want to thank everyone. You know, I see my buddy Sean over there and I see other folks here. I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank all of the other authors for joining me. How lucky am I to be joined by these tremendous writers? And I just want to say thank you to Bay Tales and thank you to the Simon and Schuster team and thank you to all viewers and readers. So it's really my pleasure and honor to be here.
Oh, that's so lovely. We are delighted to be hosting this launch because it's such a wonderful book. Would you mind, for those in the audience who haven't read it yet, could you give us a brief introduction to Winter Counts and tell us a little bit about what the reader might expect?
I'd be delighted to. So I understand that probably a good number of folks watching this tonight are from the United Kingdom, and so you may be less familiar with Native American issues. So I am an enrolled citizen of the Sichongu Lakota Nation. Our nation, our reservation, is located in the state of South Dakota. And so if you're not aware of this, Native American nations, we are independent countries within the boundaries of the United States of America. We are sovereign, independent nations, and there are nearly 600 of these nations within the US. And we exist somehow, somewhat uneasily between the US government and our own governments. So the book, Winter Counts, is about the broken criminal justice system on many Native reservations. So I'll keep this short because I want to get into the questions and everything else. But essentially, the US government, the United States government, has forbidden Native American nations from prosecuting felony crimes that occur on our own lands. We are not allowed to prosecute these crimes. Instead, our federal law enforcement come to our reservations and prosecute the crimes, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Attorney's offices. They are supposed to prosecute child abusers, murderers, rapists. However, they are declining to prosecute about 40% of all felony cases. And so these criminal justice offenders are set free to go out and offend again. So what we've seen happen over the last several decades is a class of private vigilantes have sprung up on many Native American reservations. These are people who will go out and get some justice for a price if the US government will not do their job. Winter Counts is the story of Virgil Wounded Horse, who is one of those hired vigilantes. But it's more than just the story of a vigilante. It's also a tale about identity. What does it mean to be Native American today? What does it mean to be marginalized in the United States of America? And it's also a family story in some ways, because Virgil is raising his 14-year-old nephew, Nathan. And finally, I hope that readers will learn a little bit about Native American culture and the issues that are troubling us today in 21st century America.
That is a very succinct explanation. Thank you for that. I understand you've prepared a short reading for us this evening.
I will. I will. And by the way, I'm so delighted to see on the chat. I see we've got folks from the US, somebody from Toronto, all over the UK. I see some folks are drinking coffee. Some folks are drinking wine. I'd like to join you all in the wine. It's a little bit early here in the US, but maybe a little bit later in the day. So let me just jump right into the reading. I'm going to read a very short first chapter to Winter Counts. Because it sets up the tale. And I want to apologize to my friend Sean Cosby, who's heard me read this before a couple of times. And if I haven't said this yet, hey, readers, if you haven't, viewers, the authors that are joining us today are writing some of the best crime fiction anywhere, and so we're going to give them a chance to talk about their own works, but you're going to be blown away with some of the books from the folks on this panel. But let me just read a couple of pages for you guys to set the stage. So this is literally the first chapter, the first 4 pages of Winter Counts. I leaned back in the seat of my old Ford Pinto, listening to the sounds coming from the depot, the reservation's only tavern. There was a stream of Indians and white ranchers going inside. I knew Gov Yellowhawk was there with his buddies, pounding beers and drinking shots. Gov taught gym at the local school, football, basketball, soccer. But word was, he sometimes got a little too involved with his students, both boys and girls. I was going to let him get good and drunk, then the real party would start. I had brass knuckles and a baseball bat stowed in my trunk, but those wouldn't be necessary. Gov was a fat-ass piece of shit, with a fry bread gut as big as a buffalo's ass. I'd been hired to beat the hell out of Gov by the father of a little girl at the school. Gov had sneaked up on the girl in the bathroom, held her down, and raped her. The girl's parents had confronted the school's principal, but Gov came from one of the most powerful families on the res, and the school refused to take any action. The principal had even threatened a lawsuit against the parents for making a false accusation. The tribal police couldn't do anything. The feds prosecuted all felony crimes on the res, and they didn't mess with any crime short of murder. Now, the little girl was too scared to go back to her class, and Gov was free to molest other kids. I'd waived my fee for this job. Usually I charged $100 for each tooth I knocked out and each bone I broke, but I decided to kick Gov's ass for free. I'd hated him for years. Even as a teenager, he was a mean asshole who'd terrorized other kids, especially Ayeskas like me. Of course, Gov had always been accompanied by his gang. I couldn't remember him ever fighting solo. But tonight was his time. The stones, gimme shelter, drifted through the door of the bar to the parking lot, leaving little melodic ripples like ghosts in my head. I lit a cigarette and waited for him. He'd come out sooner or later. In about an hour, I spotted him walking out of the door from the bar. He was singing an off-key tune and stumbling. I slipped out of the Pinto, and I crouched behind his shiny new pickup. He'd parked at the far end of the lot so that no one would ding his expensive ride. That suited me just fine. I could enact some Indian justice away from any of Gov's drinking buddies. I moved out from the shadows. He wore faded jeans and a T-shirt with a Fighting Sioux mascot. His eyes were foggy, and he stank of beer. I could see the birthmark on his forehead that looked like a little tomahawk. Hey, Gov. What the fuck? He squinted into the darkness, unable to pinpoint who was speaking to him. It's Virgil. Who? Virgil Wounded Horse. Oh, are you drinking or what? The bar just closed. Yeah, I know it's closed. I was waiting for you. What for? Grace Little Thunder. His face darkened. Ain't seen her. That's not what I hear. I take care of the Wakaneja. Show 'em how to be Lakota. Sometimes the parents don't appreciate it. The way of the world, huh? I move between Gov and the truck. I teach the kids, help their families. Sometimes they want more than I can give. Saint Gov. Just a guy. A guy who likes to cornhole the boys and finger the girls. You know how kids are. They want attention. They make shit up, so people make a fuss over them. The other kids making shit up too? I heard about you and little Joey Dupree. Gov tried to move past me. I don't need this bullshit. I ain't seen you out there helping the Oyate. From what I hear, you don't do nothing. You got shit to say, take it up with Principal Smith. I'm getting out of here. I don't think so. Look, asshole, Grace Little Thunder's family is nothing but trash. Her mom's a drunk, and her dad ain't worked in 10 years. That girl is only 9 years old. Eat shit. What business is it of yours? I landed a hard body shot to his midsection. The punch would have knocked most men over, but his massive stomach absorbed most of the blow. A Heska motherfucker, he snarled and lunged at me. I saw the move coming, sidestepped it, and I smashed him in the jaw. He shook his head like a wet dog. How the fuck was he still standing up? I thought about grabbing the baseball bat, but then I felt a blinding pain in my side. A blow to the kidney, then another, this one worse than the first. Waves of electricity, neural impulses. Gotta stay up, don't go down or it's finished. Reeling, dizzy, I tried to puzzle out a strategy, but my mind was like an iceberg, slowly bobbing in the waters. You half-breed bastard, he roared. I felt his spittle on my face, and then I was on the ground. Shit, he kicked me in the back over and over, each blow a jackhammer. I tried to maneuver through the cloud in my brain. Gov panted, I saw. He was out of breath. Grab his feet, I thought. I snaked out my arm and yanked his legs. He went down with a thud, and I saw my opening. I stood up, grabbed his right arm, and twisted it behind his back until I felt some resistance. Then I twisted some more. How you like that, you son of a bitch, I said. Gov looked up at me and hissed. Fuck you, Haffy. I had to hand it to him. Gov had some balls. I flashed back to high school when I'd been much smaller, not the big guy I was now. I remembered all the times I'd been held down and beaten by Gov and the other full-bloods, my angry tears, the humiliation still with me. I wondered if I should let Gov go, show him the mercy that I'd never been given. That was the Lakota way, wasn't it? Wachantognaka, one of the 7 Lakota values. It meant compassion, generosity, kindness, forgiveness. I remember the lessons from my teachers back at school. They taught that the greatest honor, the greatest bravery came when a warrior chose to let his enemy go free and touch him with the coup stick. Legend was that even Crazy Horse had shown his courage by counting coup on a Pawnee warrior once, chasing him across the river, but deciding not to kill him to honor his bravery and grant him his freedom. I knew that the honorable thing to do, the Lakota way, was to set Gov free without any more punishment. Fuck that. I twisted his arm until it came loose from the socket with a sickening crunch. Then I stepped back and kicked him in the cheek with all my force, snapping his head back violently. I took my boot heel and smashed it down on his face, teeth snapping like stale potato chips. I kneeled down and grabbed his hair. Listen to me, you goddamn scumbag. You ever touch another kid at that school, I'll cut your dick off and shove it down your throat. You hear me, Skin? He didn't say anything. His left eye was swollen and bloody, and his nose, seemingly gone, pounded back into his face. Blood streamed from the black hole of his former nose and mouth. How's that for counting coup, asshole? I said. I leaned over to see if he was still breathing. A few faint breaths. I saw some teeth lying on the concrete. They looked like little yellow tombstones. I scooped them up and stuck them in my pocket.
Thank you so much for that, David. If you get a second to look at the chat, it's going wild with people really loving your reading. So thank you so much for that. I do have one quick question before we go to our fantastic guests. Was there any one thing that inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so what inspired me to write the book really was my life, and my history on the reservation in South Dakota. Again, we live in, people on the reservation live in severe economic disadvantage. We have an 85% unemployment rate. Our healthcare system is terrible. And the criminal justice system is broken there, as I previously explained. So in my day job, I teach at university Native American studies. So I teach about these issues, and I have for many years. But I decided that I wanted to write about them in a fictional sense, but not hopefully in a didactic or, preachy way. I wanted to tell a great story, but at the same time illustrate the problems that we have on the reservation.
I think you do that brilliantly. Thank you for that. So I'm going to hand over to our first guest this evening, and that is James DeLargy, who is the author of 55 and Vanished. His debut thriller, 55, was published in April 2019 by Simon and Schuster and has been sold to 21 territories to date. James's second novel, Vanished, is released in paperback today. James, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I understand you have a question for David.
I do indeed, but before I get to the questions, I just have to say to David that Winter Counts is a fantastic novel, and it's just one of those novels that swallowed me up from page one, and just never let me go. So congratulations on an amazing novel. You're reading sort of hints to it, but Virgil Wounded Horse is such a rich and intriguing and at times brutal character. And from an outside perspective, he seems like such a great character to write stories about. So how much fun did you have creating and writing Virgil, or did you find the journey of trying to deliver justice with his fists and his wits tough to write?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on your paperback publication day and selling your novel in 22 territories. We were speaking before this started. That's astonishing and just wonderful. So thank you, for the question and for being here today. It was very fun. It was not difficult at all to write Virgil Wounded Horse. It was great. It was very, very fun to write this character. He's such a rich character because he is conflicted about the morality of being a vigilante. Even though he's not educated, he's smart. And he knows that what he's doing is wrong in some sense, but he's grappling with the idea of justice. Is it justice to go after someone that's hurt your child? I mean, it may be if the government won't do anything. So I had a lot of fun writing Virgil. Now, there were parts of the book that were very, very difficult to write. The 14-year-old nephew that Virgil is the guardian of is named Nathan. I am a dad. I have two sons. They're now 14 and 16. And at the time, David Jr. When I was writing this book, was 13. And so writing, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but Nathan, the 14-year-old in the book, gets into quite a bit of trouble. And obviously I modeled him on my son. And so it was difficult to kind of write those passages. So I very much struggled with those. And I guess it's not a spoiler to give away. There's one chapter in the book where a young child freezes to death. On the reservation, we don't have heating systems, most of our houses. We don't have electric or natural gas systems. You have to burn firewood or get a propane delivery. And it gets exceptionally cold in South Dakota. I don't know what scale y'all are on temperature-wise. We're 25 below Fahrenheit, 25 below in Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Celsius, But I mean, people freeze to death. And if you can't afford your propane delivery, you're in trouble. And so that chapter was very, very difficult to write because these are things that really happen on my reservation. So Virgil was a delight to write, but some of the other chapters more difficult.
And I think that comes across in the book, how sort of passionate you are and how Virgil Wounded Horse himself is such a wonderfully conflicted but passionate character. And so again, congratulations. Wonderful book. Loved it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, James. And congratulations again. David, I'm going to take you straight over to Rod once I tell you that, just for our viewers, minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit is minus 31 degrees centigrade.
Oh.
So I've done the quick translation there. Rod Reynolds is the author of 5 novels, including the Charlie Yates series and the CWA Dagger longlisted Blood Red City. His latest novel, Black Reed Bay, is the start of a new series and sees Detective Casey Ray investigating the disappearance of a young woman from an exclusive beachfront community in Long Island, New York, and finds herself drawn into a nightmare world of murder and corruption. Rod, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to hand you over to David now, and yes, I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. David, congratulations again, echoing James's comments. Fantastic book. I loved every word of it, enjoyed reading it, and I just wish you every success with it because it deserves to be huge.
Thank you so much.
I had a quick question for you. So one of the many things that I enjoyed about the book was the setting, which is obviously very vividly captured. And I thought the depiction that you made of the Rosebud Reservation is obviously it's completely uncompromising. You've gone with, for want of a better phrase, warts and all depiction of what it's like to live there. And I just wondered how much and in what ways that influenced the development of the story.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Rod again for joining us tonight. And I just want to say that I personally cannot wait to read about the new series, and especially set in Long Island, where I spent a couple of years living. And so I'm just so delighted to dig into your new novel. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that great question. The setting very much influenced the book. Again, because most people in America have not set foot on a Native American reservation. They don't really have an idea of what it's like. I've had people say, do you guys still live in teepees? And I'm like, no, we don't live in fancy houses, but we have progressed beyond teepees. And so, the setting, what I wanted to do is I felt a duty to portray the reservation accurately but positively. And so I wanted to show the problem that we have economically on the reservation. It's very difficult. As I said before, the health system is troubled there. The average life expectancy for a man living on the reservation is 47 years old. Now, by contrast, off the reservation, it's I think for a male, 77. So we live, on average 30 years less because we don't have a place to get healthy food. We don't have a decent healthcare system, and people are just not aware of this. And they're also not aware that our religion, our spirituality, was made a criminal offense until the year 1978. So literally until the year 1978, if we practiced our ceremonies and our traditions, we could be sent to prison, and many were. And so people don't know about this. So I wanted to write about the setting of the reservation as well as the issues, but positively as well. I felt a duty to do that. So I chose not to write into some of the stereotypes that often plague folks who write about Native Americans. So the setting, I think, very much shaped the writing of the book.
Yeah, of course. I had a second question. Vic, I don't know if am I allowed to steal a bit more time?
Just because it's you. Yeah, go on.
So it was kind of picking up on James's question actually about Virgil Wounded Horse, who's such a great character. And it was really the other side of what James was asking. He's obviously an anti-hero in the way that you've written him, and in the sense that he's very true only to his own moral code. But what I wondered was there ever any pressure or temptation to write him as a more kind of clean-cut, kind of white hat kind of goody two-shoes good guy?
Great question. No, I never felt any pressure either from myself or from my editors here in the US. I never felt any pressure to try to clean him up. He does some things that are very brutal in the book, but I believe that he lives by a moral code. It may not be a code that all of us agree with, but he has his own code. So I never felt that I wanted to make him too clean cut. And I should mention that I am writing the sequel to the book, and he's going to grapple with this very issue that you've raised even more. So in the second book, I'm right in the middle of it. This issue is going to come up in a much larger way. So thank you for that wonderful question.
Fantastic. Look forward to reading it. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rod. Before we talk about the competition, David, we've had quite an interesting question from one of our Bay Tales regular audience members, Jill Carr. She says, excuse my ignorance, but could you explain the term enrolled citizen, please?
I'd be delighted to. So Native Americans, as I said earlier, are independent nations. So we exist as separate sovereign nations, but every Native American nation has its own criteria to be enrolled as a citizen. So I actually hold dual citizenship. I am an enrolled citizen of the Sicangu Lakota Nation, and I'm an enrolled citizen of the United States of America. So, but it varies from tribe to tribe. Typically most nations use something called blood quantum. You have to be at least 25% by blood Native American to be enrolled. So when we say someone is enrolled, it means they actually have citizenship in a native nation.
So does that mean you have 2 passports then? Is that a really silly question?
It is not a silly question. My nation does not issue passports, but the Navajo Nation does. They actually offer, they do have a separate passport. I do have an ID. I have 2 IDs. So
excellent. Great. Thank you for that. I don't think we've actually answered the question for the competition yet, so I'm going to hang on to that until we have. In the meantime, we are going to invite our 3rd guest, Robert Scragg, to join us. Robert Scragg is the author of the Porter and Stiles series, book 1 of which was a Read Regional pick for 2019, and most recently the 4th instalment, End of the Line, was chosen as Book of the Week in The Sun. Earlier this year, Rob won the Lindisfarne Prize for Crime Fiction and also made the shortlist for the CWA Short Story Dagger. Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vic. Hi, David. I have to say, so I was at Harrogate Festival quite recently, and I saw advanced copies of your book being passed around there. I saw a couple there, and I was gutted I didn't manage to get one there, so I was genuinely quite excited when one turned up in the post. And just to echo what the other guys have said, absolutely loved it. It's kind of stood apart from a lot of the other debuts that I've read this year, and I think it's one that's going to stay with me for a while. And I think one of the main reasons for that is the main character, Virgil. And I found him fascinating because there's so much more to him than just a tough guy image that he projects. So what I'd love to hear from you is just your thoughts around that, the struggle that Virgil has with his own Native American identity and how that influenced the character and the story.
Great question, and I just want to thank you as well as I have the others, and I can't wait. Congratulations to you for making the short list for the short story Dagger. That's fantastic. So I'm just so deeply honored to be with these amazing writers. So thank you again. Let me answer the question about Virgil and what it is about his character. So Virgil, if you're not in America, and even if you are, you probably don't know this term, Heska. An Heska in our nation is a slur in the Lakota language for half-breed. So when you call somebody an Heska on the Rosebud Reservation, you're itching for a fight. Virgil is an Heska, as am I, so half white, half Native American. And Virgil's character is shaped by this not quite fitting in 2 worlds. So on the reservation, he's sometimes bullied because he's not a full-blood Native. When he leaves the reservation, he's too Native and he's sometimes discriminated against. So he never really feels that he fits in anywhere. And in the book, he rejects his Native American identity. He says, I want nothing to do with that. Obviously, he goes through a journey over the course of the book. But so the book is not just about criminal justice matters, but it's also about identity. Because I think for all of us, we probably feel that we don't fit in at times, whether, whatever the circumstances are. And so I hope that Virgil's struggle as an Heska, not quite fitting in either world, is something that really resonates with readers. And so that was another layer in the book that I tried to build in, not just his identity as a tough guy, but he's also coming to grips with what does it mean to be Native American in these days, and especially raising his nephew. So again, that I'll just leave it right there.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We did have a question from Rose Cullen, which was very, very similar, along similar lines. So hopefully we've answered that for you, Rose. But if not, please do come back to us and we'll certainly try. For those of you who are a little late joining us, please feel free to pop your questions for David and our other panellists in the Q&A down along the bottom. And if you just want to say hi or how much you've enjoyed any of the books from the panellists this evening, please feel free. It's always nice to hear. And we are going to go over to S.A. Cosby now. And he is the New York Times national best-selling, award-winning author from southeastern Virginia. His books include My Darkest Prayer, the multi-award-winning Blacktop Wasteland, one of which I happen to know is Rob Scragg's, one of his top books of all time. S.A. Cosby is also the author of the best-selling Razorblade Tears, so we're really thrilled to have him tonight. Sean, would you like to? There you are, lovely. Thank you for that. Yes. I believe you two are old friends, so I'm just going to let you two have a bit of a chat. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And to my good friend David, I'm so glad to be here. So excited for you and the book release in the United States. I'm going to tell a quick anecdote that I hope doesn't embarrass my friend too much. But 2 years ago, we were at BoucherCon in Dallas, Texas, and I had gone to a panel. And I had heard David talk about his upcoming book, his past work, his work as a lawyer, and his work on behalf of the Lakota Nation. And so we were in the bar in the good old days before the pandemic. And I remember talking to him, and I said to him, I said, yeah, I've got a book coming out too. And I said, man, wouldn't it be great if both of us, our books did really well or reached a wide audience? And I cannot tell you how happy I am for the success that you've had with Winter Counts in the United States. And I'm sure we'll have the same success in the UK. It's a remarkable novel, an incredible book, and I think a book that will be talked about not just as a indigenous work of art, but and a great American novel for the years to come. So having said all that and butted you up, I have a question. So, and my question sort of goes along with my statement. When you were thinking about writing Winter Counts, or when you had written it, you've had so much success with it, including an Edgar and an Anthony Award. I want to know, how different is the reality of the success that you deservedly encountered? How much does it differ from the expectations you had going as a first-time author?
Well, hey, everyone. First of all, thank you to my buddy Sean for joining us here. It's my honor. And if you don't know, I didn't know this, but I'm thrilled. Look here, this is the UK version. And oh my gosh, whose name is that right there? That'd be S.A. Cosby right at the top of the novel right there. So, let me just say a few words before I jump into the expectations. Folks, if you don't know Razorblade Tears, and I suspect anybody that's watching this probably knows about it, it is easily one of the best books that I've read in a long time. Okay. I thought I loved Blacktop Wasteland. Okay. I love that book a lot. And indeed, I wrote a little essay for it for the Book of the Month Club. When, for Razorblade Tears, I wrote an essay and I said, I thought I loved Blacktop Wasteland, but then I read Razorblade Tears and I'm like, oh man, there was a high bar, but it was surpassed. And so it has been a remarkable run. So as Sean has said here, we met each other. You had a couple of books out, but I don't think it had been with a big press, right? And so we were both, in a sense, debut novelists. And we met in 2019 at the BoucherCon in Dallas. And And we took to each other immediately. We had drinks. It was just great talking. And I don't think either one of us had anticipated what was going to happen. I did not win the Edgar. I was nominated, but I did not win. Thank you, though. But Sean and I both won this year in our respective categories. Oh gosh, the Anthony, the Barry, the Thriller, and the McCavity. Is that right? And so it was just So it was just really wonderful to for us to be constantly named together. It was great. And it was wonderful. So, folks, let me just say this. If there is anybody left in this audience that has not read Razorblade Tears, do yourselves a favor. Plus, I hear it's going to be on the big screen pretty soon as well. So there's lots of good stuff happening for this man. And I know he's writing a new book, too. He's putting us all to shame. He never stops writing. So what a pleasure it has been to take this journey with Mr. Sean Cosby over this year. The expectations, I didn't have many, to be honest with you. And I don't know if you did either, Sean, because when a year ago, when this book was about to come out, the pandemic had hit, and I just didn't know how interested anybody would be in a crime novel set with a Native American protagonist on a reservation. I just didn't know. And so, my expectations were quite low, okay? But word of mouth happened, and just readers really got behind this book, as they did behind Blacktop Wasteland. And before you know it, it really started to snowball. And so I just can't express how grateful I am to all of the readers and supporters of this novel, and other writers as well. Everybody has just been wonderful. Everybody in the crime fiction community has just been great. I've heard this over and over, and it's just true. We are, I think, some of the best folks out there. So my expectations were not high, and they've been shattered. So again, thank you for joining me, my friend. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I can't wait till we get to get some of that whiskey in person.
Yes, and thank you so much for the answer to that great question. I just want to say before I turn it back over, it has been one of the great pleasures of my life to see your name and my name and other writers of color and other writers from marginalized communities be venerated and elevated and accepted. It has been an incredible year for writing, and I'm so happy for you, my friend, and I hope the best for your book. And I can't wait again until we can, like you said, as we say down here, bend our elbows a couple times together. Thank you.
Sean, I'll be asking you to come back in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to ask David a few questions. And I just want to say how lovely your friendship is. It's just made me smile so much. The pair of you together is just so lovely. Thank you for that. David, I've got a few questions from our audience for you. Craig Sisterson, I can never say that, how bad is that, who chaired a panel with you at Bloody Scotland recently, says, Kia ora, David. I was wondering if you might feel like sharing with the viewers here about your recent visit to the site of the former Carlisle Indian School and the impact that had on you.
Oh, I'd be delighted. And first of all, thank you, Craig, for all of the support you've been in this book, you've done for this book. It was a pleasure to speak with you some weeks ago and communicate with you electronically. And folks, you know, if you don't know his book, Southern Cross Crime, you need to go get it. It is I recently mentioned it in an article I wrote. It is the indispensable guide for Australian and New Zealand crime fiction. It's fantastic. But to answer the question, yes, I did recently take a trip to Pennsylvania to what's known as the former grounds of the Carlisle Indian School. So for UK readers who may not be aware, viewers who may not be aware of this, Native American children for about 75 years were taken without consent from their parents. About 70% of all Native American children, were stolen from their parents. No consent, and often shipped across the country to what are called Native American boarding schools. My own grandmother was one of them, okay? And in these schools, they were forced to cut their hair. They weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to practice their religion. The government was trying to force them to assimilate to European ways and leave their indigenous identity behind. In fact, the famous phrase by Colonel Pratt, Captain Pratt, who ran the Carlisle Indian School, he would say, "We need to kill the Indian in order to save the man." That was the motto of the school. And so I visited the grounds of the Carlisle Indian School. This was the first and worst of all of the children there. And if I didn't mention this, not only were the children treated badly, but they were frequently sexually abused and physically abused. And every Native American boarding school has a small little cemetery where the children who were murdered by the teachers would be buried. And thankfully, my grandmother was not murdered. But I took a visit to the school, and I had never been there, and it was a powerfully moving experience because I visited a building called the Guardhouse. And the US government is trying to whitewash what this building had been used for. It's an old stone building with bars in the windows made of granite and built in the 1700s, allegedly by George Washington and his men. I don't know if that's true, but there's a little plaque on the wall that says this was used to store ammunition. Well, maybe. It was used for 70 years as a jail for Native children who were disruptive in the class. They would be put in this dark, dank prison. 5 and 6-year-old children would be stuck in there. It must have been horrifying for them to be in there and to be scared and alone. And so seeing that institution really, and that building really affected me deeply. And I will say that Native American boarding schools are going to come up in the sequel to Winter Counts, which I'm tentatively titling Wounded Horse. So Native American boarding schools, it's a shame that we have in the US and Canada as well. It's a true stain upon our history.
That was actually going to be my next question. Keith Young has said he loved the readings and is enjoying the book so far. He was Winter Counts is written in modern times, but obviously in the sequel you're thinking about looking into the history a little bit more. Is that right?
So without giving away too much of the plot, there is actually some litigation happening right now in the state of South Dakota involving Native American boarding schools. Land that is no longer used as a native boarding school is supposed to revert back to the tribe. Yeah. And that's not happening. So that's going to play a part in this novel. And so it will not be a historical novel. It will also be set in the present day, but it will examine some of these issues that have really affected us deeply. In fact, we have a term here in the US called intergenerational trauma. We believe that the trauma which was visited upon our grandparents and our great-grandparents is often passed on to the children in some way, as it has for other groups as well. And so it's a true shame what happened to these children. I mean, parents out there, imagine if your 5 or 6 year old child was snatched from you without your consent. And, we didn't have the internet in those days. You couldn't send an email, how you doing? You often wouldn't see them again. It was a true tragedy.
Thank you. This, I think, is a lovely question from Susan, the book trailer, who says, what knowledge about your people/tribe do you hope readers take away from the novel?
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for that question. I hope what people get from the novel is a sense of what Native American people are like today, because we're not like what you see in the movies. If you see the movies like Dances with Wolves, historical films set in the 1800s, you think that natives are a certain way. The stereotype is that we're very stoic, but natives are funny. We're vibrant. We're resilient. They're the funniest people that I know. So I hope that some of the joy, the humor, just the sheer resiliency of Native American people comes through in the book. And I should say, I'm not sure if it's in the UK yet, but there are some wonderful TV shows here in the US that one is called Reservation Dogs. It's on the FX network streaming platform, and it's written by all Native writers, 100% Native writers in the room, Native cast, and it really shows what it's like to be Native American today in the 21st century. So it's called Reservation Dogs, and it's fantastic. So again, if it makes its way across the ocean, I hope you all get a chance to watch it.
I've written it down. I certainly will be looking it up.